45-day difference that's been splitting scholars for decades. In Daniel chapter 12, we get two mysterious time periods, 1,290 days and 1,335 days. And that extra 45 days has created one of the most contentious debates in Seventh-day Adventist theology. Today, we're diving deep into these prophetic timelines through the lens of SDA Historicist interpretation, exploring how William Miller's calculations from AD 508 to 1844 became foundational doctrine, and why modern scholars are challenging everything. By the end, you'll understand the scholarly evidence behind these interpretations and what's at stake for Adventist identity. Let me bring in someone who spent years studying this. Help us understand what makes these time periods so significant in the first place.
Right, so we're dealing with Daniel 12, 1:12, which says, "From the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and reaches the end of the 1,335 days." The question is, what do these numbers actually mean?
And the traditional Adventist answer involves something called the year-day principle, right?
Exactly. According to the Biblical Research Institute, this interpretation of the 1,290 and 1,335 days as years can be traced back to Jewish expositors of the 8th century AD. It's based on passages like Numbers 14, 34, and Ezekiel 4, 6, 7, where a day represents a year.
So this isn't some modern invention. There's actually ancient precedent for this approach?
Absolutely. The page content shows it was advocated by followers of Joachim of Floris from 1130, 1202, and continued through pre-Reformation, Reformation, and Protestant traditions. This is deep historical interpretation.
But then William Miller comes along in the 1800s and really develops this into a specific timeline. Walk me through his calculations.
Miller believed both the 1,290 and 1,335-year periods began in AD 508 with Clovis's victory over the Arian Visigoths. This was crucial because it represented the union of political and ecclesiastical powers, basically church and state coming together.
And why was that specific event so significant?
According to Miller's interpretation, this was when medieval Catholicism gained the power to punish heretics. It was the setting up of what prophecy calls the abomination that makes desolate. The 1,290 years then ended in 1798 with Pope Pius VI's imprisonment by the French army.
So 508 plus 1,290 equals 1798. That's pretty precise. But what about the extra 45 years?
The 1,335 years extended to 1843-1844, which Miller connected to the end of the 2,300 years of Daniel 8:14. This became foundational to Adventist understanding of the investigative judgment beginning in 1844.
And this interpretation stuck. The page content says it became the historical position of the Seventh-day Adventist Church up to our own days.
Right, but here's where it gets interesting. In recent years, some independent preachers have started promoting what they call new light on these prophecies, completely rejecting the traditional understanding.
What kind of new interpretation are we talking about?
They claim these should be understood as literal days, not years, to be fulfilled in the future. Some suggest both periods begin with a future national Sunday law, with the 1,290 days being time for God's people to leave cities, and the 1,335 days ending when God announces the day and hour of Christ's return.
That's a completely different framework. But the Biblical Research Institute pushes back hard against this, right?
They give 5 basic reasons why this literal day interpretation is unacceptable. The first is that it's based on a partial and biased reading of Ellen White's writings, making false claims about what she actually believed.
What are some of the other arguments against the literal day view?
There's a fascinating structural argument. The page content explains that this new view violates the fundamental principle that Scripture interprets Scripture. If you treat the 3½ times in Daniel 7:25 as past, but Daniel 12:7 as future, you're essentially making prophecy into what they call a wax nose that can be bent in any direction.
That's a vivid metaphor. So consistency across Daniel's prophecies is crucial?
Exactly. Daniel's prophecies follow what scholars call repetition and enlargement. The four major prophecies in Daniel 2, 7, 8, 9, and 10, 12 all begin in Daniel's time and end with the Second Advent. Each adds details to the same historical timeline.
So if the taking away of the daily in Daniel 8:11 refers to past events, then the same phrase in Daniel 12:11 should too?
That's the argument. And there's another structural issue. Daniel's visions are always followed by explanations. The vision in Daniel 10:12 ends at 12:4, and the time prophecies in 12v5:13 are part of the explanation section, not a new vision.
This is getting into some pretty technical biblical scholarship. But there's also historical documentation supporting the traditional dates?
Yes, Heidi Hikes wrote a source book providing primary historical sources supporting the historicist interpretation. He claims to have documentation that can officially refute objections to the traditional dating, using sources like the Corpus Iuris Civilis of Emperor Justinian.
But even Hikes acknowledges some challenges with the 508 date, right?
True. The page content shows historians are divided on when exactly Clovis converted to Christianity. Some say 496, others 508. But Hikes argues the key issue isn't Clovis's baptism date, but when the cooperation between papacy and Franks began, the union of church and state.
So it's about the broader political religious alliance, not just one person's conversion?
Exactly. And this gets to something really important. According to Abner Hernandez's research at Andrews University, these interpretations significantly impact the eschatological identity of Adventism. This isn't just academic debate.
What do you mean by eschatological identity?
Hernandez categorizes Adventist interpretations into symbolic, literal, and idealist approaches. How you interpret these time periods shapes your entire understanding of where we are in prophetic history and what Adventism's mission is.
And the page content suggests there's increasing debate among Adventist scholars about future fulfillment?
Right. Some scholars now interpret these time periods as merely literary devices, suggesting an apparent delay of the end times. Others think we can't state with certainty how these prophecies should be fulfilled, or advocate for a multi-perspective approach.
That multi-perspective approach sounds like it could get pretty complicated. How do you maintain doctrinal coherence?
That's the challenge. The page content mentions Desmond Ford's approach that integrates various prophetic interpretation methods, but this challenges traditional views. It's creating real tension within Adventist theology.
Let's step back to something that's been bugging me. Why exactly 45 extra days between 1,290 and 1,335? That seems oddly specific.
The page content from Bible Hub suggests several possibilities. Some see it as a cleansing or restoration period after the initial tribulation. Others propose it's a transition window for establishing the Messianic kingdom. The phrase, "Blessed is he who waits," suggests reward for persevering through that extra time.
So there's something special about making it through those final 45 days?
That's the implication. And historically, this created real drama. William Miller expected Christ's return at the end of the 1,335 days in 1843. When that didn't happen, it led to what Adventists call the Great Disappointment.
The Ministry Magazine article mentions how interpretations changed after that disappointment. What happened?
Miller had connected the 1,335 days with Daniel's physical resurrection and the general resurrection. The Second Advent Manual from 1843 explicitly stated that Daniel would stand in his lot, meaning be raised from the dead at the end of the days.
But when 1843 came and went without resurrections or second coming, they had to reinterpret everything?
Exactly. James White, one of the Adventist pioneers, wrote, "The view that the 1335 days extend to the resurrection we do not endorse." They had to separate the time prophecies from the resurrection expectation.
This really shows how high the stakes are for prophetic interpretation. Get the timeline wrong, and you're dealing with disappointed believers.
And that's why the Biblical Research Institute is so concerned about these new literal day interpretations. They see them as potentially leading to another disappointment if people start setting specific future dates.
But there's also the broader question of interpretive methods. The page content mentions that historicism was favored by Protestant reformers, but preterism and futurism were developed by the Roman Catholic Church?
That's fascinating context. According to the Biblical Research Institute, the historicist approach was widely accepted by reformers, the early church, and Scripture itself. But since the Catholic Church couldn't allow itself to be identified as the Antichrist, Jesuits developed alternative interpretations.
So preterism says the prophecies were fulfilled in the past, and futurism pushes them to the future, both avoiding present application to the Catholic Church?
Exactly. Luis Alcazar developed preterism in the early 1600s, and Francisco Ribera developed futurism. The page content notes that although futurism was founded by the Roman Catholic Church, it now has great reception among Protestant and evangelical churches that accept dispensationalism.
That's quite an irony. Protestant churches adopting interpretive methods originally designed to defend Catholicism.
Right, and this is why some Adventist scholars see the shift toward literal day interpretations as problematic. It's moving away from the historicist approach that was central to Protestant Reformation thinking.
Let's talk about the scholarly evidence. William Shea's paper argues that these time periods are integral to Daniel 11, not separate end-time prophecies. What's his main point?
Shea argues that both futuristic and preterist interpreters wrongly treat Daniel 12's time periods as separate from Daniel 11. He says these dates are integral parts of the prophecy and should be treated with the main body of Daniel 11, not as an appendix or separate vision.
And he uses the structure of other Daniel prophecies to support this?
Yes. He points out that in Daniel's apocalyptic portions, dates logically come after the main vision because you can't see time periods, only actions. Then an interpreter explains how long things will last. This pattern holds in Daniel 7 and 8.
So the placement of these time periods at the end of Daniel 12 actually follows the book's established pattern?
Exactly. Shea notes that Daniel didn't see the 2300 days in Daniel 8. He overheard angels discussing them after the vision ended. Same principle applies to Daniel 12.
This is really about the literary integrity of the book of Daniel as much as the prophetic interpretation.
Right. And when you step back from all the technical details, what emerges is a coherent historical timeline that Adventists believe validates their understanding of prophetic history and their role in it.
So, for traditional Adventists, these aren't just abstract numbers, they're confirmation that the church emerged at the right time in prophetic history?
Exactly. The 1844 date connects the 1,335 years with the beginning of the investigative judgment, which is central to Adventist theology. Change the interpretation of these time periods, and you potentially undermine the church's prophetic self-understanding.
And that's why Hernandez's research shows these interpretations significantly impact Adventist eschatological identity. It's not just about dates, it's about mission and purpose.
Precisely. Whether you see these prophecies as fulfilled in the past, happening in the future, or as literary devices shapes everything. Your understanding of current events, the church's role, even how urgently you approach evangelism.
So when you step back from all this scholarly debate, here's what really matters. These aren't just academic exercises. How you interpret Daniel 12's time periods shapes your entire worldview about where we are in history and what comes next.
And the evidence strongly supports the traditional historicist approach. From 8th century Jewish expositors to Protestant reformers to detailed historical documentation, there's a consistent interpretive tradition that sees these prophecies as already fulfilled.
The 45-day difference between 1,290 and 1,335 days isn't just mathematical precision. It represents something profound about waiting, perseverance, and blessing. Those extra days matter.
Right. And while new interpretations will always emerge, the scholarly foundation for the traditional view remains solid. The structural arguments, historical documentation, and hermeneutical principles all point in the same direction.
Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts. Remember those 45 extra days that seemed like a small detail? They've shaped an entire denomination's understanding of its place in prophetic history. Sometimes the smallest numbers carry the biggest meaning.